Hi, I'm Michael Stern, and I've lived in Bennington now since May of 2010. Um, I'm concerned about a unsustainable cannabis policy that we have embraced as the United States ever since Richard Nixon ignored the findings of the Schaefer Commission and decided to keep cannabis on Schedule 1. I like to explain to people that, in my opinion, cannabis is not a drug because the textbook definition of a drug, or what is the difference between a drug and a poison, the textbook definition is dose, and at no dose does cannabis become poisonous. It's basically a food substance and a healthful herb which has some pleasant side effects if you heat it up to a certain degree. Actually, cannabis not heated up won't get anybody high, but it'll heal a lot of people. We have been fed lies by our government for a long time, and we actually believe them. But we have an opportunity now to make a sustainable cannabis policy which should benefit everybody in Vermont. From what I've been talking to people about, I sent Brian Campion an email that outlines a three-legged stool policy. And I'm going to briefly go over this because I think in essence it is a good policy. My goal in doing this exercise was to try and imagine a policy which in 10 years will look like a good idea, but try and enact it in 2. That way, Vermont can benefit economically even if our neighboring states legalize cannabis. So for me, the three-legged stool, the first leg is it's a non-starter without the first leg. And that is a complete and total decoupling of cannabis from the criminal justice system. Yes, there may be a little bit of excesses that people who should be caught up are let go, because I recommend an immediate amnesty for everybody convicted solely on cannabis charges, as well as an immediate amnesty for anybody who in good faith conducted the war against drugs. But after a certain date, and I'd like to recommend July 2nd because it's the anniversary when in 1771 Vermont became the first independent nation in the world to ban slavery. And I think that freedom is a good thing to celebrate, especially the day or two before the 4th of July. But that way we can all start with a fresh, clean slate. So what is the second leg? Well, the second leg, this is an economic issue. To help avoid the economic injustices such as what occurred when the voters voted down Ohio's initiative, which would have put cannabis production in the hands of about 10 wealthy families, we need to have a more democratic approach here in Vermont. And my vision, and the vision of others like me, is if you've been a resident and in Vermont for a certain period of time, I'd like to recommend 4 years because that's the amount of time you have to be to run for governor, but it's up to debate, that you can have your own 10 by 10 license to grow personally in your own home for consumption by adults in your own household. This will allow people to make their own oils, to help to cure the diseases of their family. And growing your own is not that easy. There's no guarantee that you're going to not have mites or aphids, or if you use pesticides, you're poisoning it, so you don't want to use pesticides. Anyhow, the idea is to just give people the right to take a little bit of the economic stress of a cannabis habit out. But let's say you're a grower already and you do a really good job, and a 10 by 10 is not going to cut it for you. Well, then you can get yourself a grower's license, and that's leg 3 of the three-legged stool, is 3 licenses. I think this is the way they do it in Washington. You have a grower's license, a seller's license, or a middleman or transporter's license, but not all 3. So here's the way I'd imagine this working. You, as a grower, may be able to grow very fine quality cannabis without using pesticides and fertilizer. So you call the central processing facility, which I imagine being in Randolph, right next to our technical college, and being run by graduate students of that technical college, which would give people an incentive to get higher education in Vermont. And so you call them and you say you're a grower, you give them your license number, and they will mail you a key because you're telling them I've got 4 pounds. So they mail you a key, and then the transporter arrives with a 4-pound box. And you open that key, which you got by FedEx, you signed for it in person, and you open up your box and you put your product in, and then you lock it and you go mail the key back to Randolph. And then the transporter takes it to Randolph, where a second key opens up the box, and that's your contribution. Then, based upon the quality of your product, you are issued cannabis credits, somewhere between 100 and 0. 100 is like perfect bud that you can't find in the real world. So a good bud would be like somewhere between 90 and 95. That is, if it has no fertilizer, it has high potency, it is a desirable flavor or breed, and it actually turns out to be what you said it was. You get all the maximum cannabis points. That cannabis points is then multiplied by the prevailing price for that particular breed of cannabis, and then factored in by the weight of usable cannabis, not including stems, et cetera, et cetera. So then, if you have really good, pure product, you're going to get a lot of credit for your product. And if you use fertilizer or pesticides, you will get 0 cannabis credits, so your weight and the market price gets multiplied by 0. So, sorry, your idea of getting rich quick by using fertilizer and pesticides has just backfired on you. The other idea is we don't want people coming in and clear cutting, 10 acres of forest to plant cannabis. So we need to have some sort of system, sort of like a hyperbolic curve, where you find the sweet point. So somebody who grows their 10 by 10 pays 0 tax on there. When somebody who grows 2 by 10 by 10s pays a minimum amount of tax, which increases percentage-wise till by the time you're growing 5 acres, we're taxing you at 100% of your product. So their incentive is not to overdevelop and saturate the market with big growers who will put the little guys out of business and give the people who want to make a little bit of extra money on the side an opportunity to do so at less cost than people who want to go in it for big business. So then, now how do you buy it? Well, it's very simple. We already have a Department of Transportation where you get photo IDs. So if you're a Vermont person, you just go in the next time you get your ID updated, it's got a little green leaf on it. And if you're an out-of-stater, you can pay an exorbitant fee and get your own cannabis buying card. Okay, so you go into a cellar. Now, who is a cellar? No, it is not a Vermont state liquor store. It is not a place that you got to feel like you're doing something wicked by going into. I imagine that cellars will be restaurants, bed and breakfasts, ski resorts, little, grocery stores even. All you have to do is pay for your license. So you go into a cellar, you present your ID, they scan your ID, the seller's ID, and the holographic barcode on your ounce of Vermont regulated cannabis, and then it goes into the system. So the people who grow it will get their income from that sale. The people who transported it will get their little piece of the income from that sale, and the people who sell it will get their little piece. And even if the government doesn't charge anything on top of the fees for supporting the infrastructure, the amount of tourist revenue with the existing tourist taxes will probably be enough to not only support a good, sound mental health system, but might go a long way towards helping people to afford a single-payer health system. We have an opportunity now not just to bring tourists into the state, but to potentially export to Canada, which is about ready to legalize it, and maybe have bills of reciprocity so that our cannabis cards are good in Colorado and Oregon and Washington without paying any extra fees, and theirs are good here. This is the kind of sustainable cannabis policy that if we listen to the history of the United States and ignore all the lies that we've been told about the detrimental effects of using a benign and beneficial herb, then we stand the chance to not only make the economy of Vermont excellent, but it may even become known as the Green Mountain Renaissance. And I would like to see everybody's vote rise as a result of listening to the truth and paying attention to the people who, theoretically, the government is for us, by us, and of us. So if you are standing in the way of progress, I'm putting you on notice. We will be opposing you with everything that we have. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me, and talk to your representatives about what you want. Because even if you don't want cannabis, they need to know that too. Thank you very much.